The private jet cut across the night sky like a blade, descending into Los Angeles without warning, without entourage, without announcement. Ethan Chandler hadn't told a soul he was leaving Manhattan. Not his assistants, not the chauffeur who normally greeted him at LAX, not even the staff at the sprawling Chandler estate. To everyone who knew him, the billionaire was still supposed to be in New York, smiling for cameras and making deals in glass towers. But as he sat at dinner hours earlier, something had clawed at him, an unease so sharp it felt like someone whispering into his ear, "Go home now. Do not wait." The black car he borrowed from a private service wound its way through the silent streets of Beverly Hills. The estate appeared in the distance, a vast silhouette against the silver wash of the moon. But tonight, it didn't look like home. It looked like a fortress that had chosen to keep its secrets locked inside. Ethan's heart hitched when he saw it, one window glowing faintly in the east wing. That was his father's suite. His father hadn't stayed awake past 10 in years. The old man's health had kept him bound to a strict routine, his life shrinking smaller with each passing month. But now, long after midnight, there was light. He stepped inside the mansion, his footsteps sinking into the echoing silence. The air carried a different weight, heavy with something unseen. The chandeliers overhead glittered, but their brilliance did nothing to soften the feeling that the house was holding its breath. Every sound was amplified, the faint hum of air conditioning, the subtle groan of marble beneath his shoes, the whisper of curtains shifting against the glass. And then came the voices. Low, hurried, tense. Coming from the east wing. Ethan moved closer, each step slower than the last. His hand grazed the mahogany walls, steadying himself. His breathing grew shallow as the words reached him, too muffled to understand, but sharp enough to know something was wrong. He pressed against the door and pushed it open. The sight stopped him cold. Olivia Brooks, the maid he had barely acknowledged in the years she'd worked there, was kneeling on the rug in front of his father's armchair. But she wasn't dusting shelves or pouring tea. Her hands shook as she held open a leather briefcase, spilling its contents across the floor. Bundles of $100 bills lay scattered in messy piles. Envelopes sealed with wax tumbled beside them, their edges frayed like secrets desperate to be revealed. "What are you doing?" Ethan's voice cracked through the silence, harsher than he intended. His father, Arthur Chandler, once a titan of oil but now reduced by illness, lifted a trembling hand. But his voice, steady, commanding, was nothing like the frailty Ethan expected. "Stop." The single word froze him. It was not a plea. It was an order. "She's the only reason I'm still breathing," Arthur said. Ethan blinked, his thoughts colliding. His father defending a maid? The same man who had built empires by trusting no one, who had cast aside allies when they no longer served him. Olivia's eyes snapped up, locking onto Ethan's with a mix of fear and steel. "You weren't supposed to see this," she whispered. "Not tonight." Ethan's fists clenched. "You're stealing from him." Her lips tightened into a trembling line. "If I were stealing, you wouldn't be standing here right now. Neither would he." The words dug into him like knives. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. Something about the way she held her ground, the way Arthur looked at her, not with suspicion but with trust, told him this wasn't theft. This was protection. Protection from what, he didn't know. Arthur gestured toward the envelopes. His hands shook, but his eyes burned with urgency. "Open the one with your name." Ethan reached down, pulling an envelope marked in black ink, his name written across the front, the date 10 years earlier. His stomach turned as he tore it open. The letter was brief, but the first line made his skin crawl. "If you are reading this, it means the lies have reached you." "What lies?" Ethan demanded, his voice breaking. Olivia stepped forward, her voice quiet, urgent. "The people you trust most are the ones who will betray you. The walls of this house are not as loyal as you think." A sharp sound shattered the moment. Glass breaking somewhere deep in the mansion. Arthur's face paled. They're here. Ethan's chest tightened. They? Who the hell is they? Olivia's grip tightened on the briefcase. Her eyes darted to Ethan's, fierce now. You can walk away and pretend none of this happened. Or you can stay and face the truth. But if you stay, you may never walk out of this house alive. The air thickened, pressing against his ribs. Ethan felt the ground sway beneath him. This wasn't about stolen money or a maid overstepping her place. This was something far darker. Something that had already infected his family long before tonight. And if you're watching this unfold and you can feel that tension, don't shrug it off. Subscribe right now, and tell us where you're watching from. Because fear like this doesn't only live in mansions. It lives in silence, in secrets, in the places closest to us. Arthur's hand clutched his son's wrist with surprising strength. Son, you need to know. You need to understand what we've been hiding. Who we've been hiding from. But the moment for answers slipped through their fingers. At the far end of the hall, a door creaked open. A shadow stretched across the polished floor, long, deliberate, undeniably human. Olivia's face drained of color. It's already too late. Ethan's lungs tightened as the shadow crept closer. Every instinct screamed to run, but his legs felt rooted to the ground. The mansion no longer felt like his. It felt like a stage, and he had walked into the middle of a performance scripted long before he ever returned. The silence pressed harder. The air smelled faintly of smoke, of something burning in the distance. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, loud and ragged in his ears. And if you're here, frozen in the same dread Ethan feels now, don't let it pass over you like another story on a screen. Subscribe now, drop your city in the comments, because betrayal this deep doesn't belong to one family, it could unfold in yours. The lights flickered once, then twice, before plunging the room into darkness. Olivia's grip on the briefcase snapped shut with a metallic click that echoed like a gunshot. Ethan's chest heaved, his mind racing. This was no longer his father's secret. It was his. If you can still hear the echo of that fear, don't look away. Subscribe before the next twist leaves you unprepared, and tell us where you're watching from. Because what happens after this moment will make everything you've seen feel like the calm before the storm. Darkness swallowed the room in an instant. For a long moment, Ethan could hear nothing but the frantic thud of his own heartbeat. The mansion, usually quiet but never menacing, felt alive now, like the walls themselves were listening. A faint scuff of shoes on polished marble echoed from the hallway, measured and deliberate. Olivia pressed her back against the wall, clutching the briefcase to her chest. Arthur's thin breaths rasped in the dark, uneven and shallow. Ethan's instincts screamed to demand answers, to shout, to fight, but something in Olivia's face silenced him. She raised a finger to her lips, her eyes glinting faintly in the dark. Stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then the light returned, not fully, just a faint glow from the emergency lamps mounted near the ceiling. The shadow stretched long across the doorway before the man appeared. Dressed in a black coat, his face partially hidden under the brim of a hat, he moved with the certainty of someone who didn't fear being discovered. Arthur stiffened in his chair. You don't belong here, he said, his voice trembling yet defiant. The intruder ignored him. His eyes, sharp and calculating, landed on the briefcase in Olivia's hands. A smirk crept across his lips. So it's true, he murmured. You finally opened it. Ethan stepped forward, his anger spiking past his confusion. Who the hell are you? The man tilted his head slightly, as though amused. Someone who knows more about your family than you ever will. Olivia shifted, placing herself between the stranger and Arthur. Her voice was firm. You weren't supposed to come tonight. That earned her a chuckle, low and unsettling. Plans change. He took one step closer. Hand it over. Ethan's fists clenched. He had no idea what was inside the envelopes beyond the one he'd opened, but instinct told him they were worth more than money. They were power. They were leverage. And this man knew it. Arthur coughed violently, his frail body trembling. "Don't you dare give it to him," he rasped. "He doesn't deserve to know." The man's eyes narrowed. "You think you can keep secrets forever? Even your son doesn't know what you've done." His gaze flicked to Ethan. "Do you really trust the old man? Do you really think the empire you live off was built clean?" Ethan felt his throat tighten. For years, he had worshipped his father's legacy, built his own fortune as a continuation of the Chandler name. But now, in this dim light, surrounded by whispers of betrayal, he wasn't so sure. Olivia's grip on the briefcase tightened. "You'll get nothing tonight. Leave." The man's smirk faded. His hand slipped inside his coat. Ethan's stomach dropped. A sharp metallic sound echoed as Olivia revealed something Ethan had never imagined she carried, a small pistol, hidden beneath her uniform. Her hand shook, but her eyes were steel. "Take one more step," she said coldly, "and you'll regret it." For the first time, the stranger hesitated. His smirk returned, though thinner now, more calculated. "You can't protect him forever. You know that." His eyes lingered on Olivia, then flicked back to Ethan. "And you're about to learn what kind of man your father really is." Then, as casually as he had arrived, he turned and slipped back into the shadows of the hallway, his footsteps fading until silence reclaimed the mansion. Ethan exhaled sharply, his hands trembling. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "Who was that? What's in this briefcase? What aren't you telling me?" Arthur's head sank against the chair, his energy drained. "Too much," he whispered. "Things you're not ready to face." Olivia holstered the pistol quickly, her eyes darting toward Ethan. "You don't have time for explanations tonight. You need to choose whether you want the truth, or your safety." Ethan stepped closer, anger and fear warring inside him. "The truth. I came back for answers, and I'm not leaving until I get them." Arthur's frail hand gripped the armrest. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Then you need to know what that man said was not a lie. Our empire, it was not built clean." The words cut into Ethan like glass. He stumbled back, his chest tightening. "What are you saying?" "That everything, my life, my career, my name, was built on corruption." Arthur's eyes glistened, a rare tear slipping down his wrinkled cheek. "Built on survival," he whispered. "And survival demands sacrifices you've never had to make." Ethan turned sharply toward Olivia. "And you? Who are you really? You don't act like a maid. You carry a gun in this house. You open secret briefcases. Why should I trust you?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Because I've risked more for this family than you ever have. Your father knows it. That's why he's still alive." The room seemed to shrink, the weight of the words crushing Ethan from all sides. The legacy he thought was his birthright was unraveling strand by strand. The people he thought he knew were wearing masks. The mansion he had called home was a labyrinth of lies. And if you're still here, trying to piece together this web of secrets, don't fool yourself into thinking it's distant. Betrayal is never far, it hides in families, in legacies, in the quiet moments when no one is supposed to be watching. Subscribe now, and tell us where you're watching from, because what you'll see next will shake you deeper than you expect. Ethan sank into a chair opposite his father, his hands gripping the armrests as though bracing for impact. "Then start talking," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "Tell me everything. Tell me why strangers walk into this house demanding secrets, why Olivia is more than she pretends to be, why you've hidden this from me." Arthur's breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling with effort. He opened his mouth, but Olivia cut in sharply. "Not here. Not tonight. The walls have ears, and you saw it for yourself, someone else is inside this house. If you want the truth, you'll need to follow me, both of you. Ethan looked at her, then at his father. His heart hammered as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. Every instinct told him this was the threshold, the line between the life he thought he had and the darkness waiting behind the curtain. Arthur's voice, barely above a whisper, broke the silence. If you go with her, there's no turning back. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I already crossed that line the moment I walked into this room. Olivia's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. Then follow me. And be ready, because the truth won't set you free. It will cage you. She moved toward the side door, the briefcase still clutched tight. Arthur struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the chair, his determination forcing his frail body upright. Ethan followed them both, his every step heavy with dread. The house groaned around them as they slipped into the narrow servants' hallway, the air colder, the shadows deeper. The silence was broken only by Arthur's ragged breathing and the echo of Ethan's pulse in his ears. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized the Chandler name wasn't just a crown. It was a curse. And if you've ever wondered what secrets your own family hides, this story should be your warning. Subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because the next truth revealed will leave no one untouched. The servants' hallway narrowed into a tight corridor that most guests never noticed, low ceiling, unfinished plaster, the faint scent of bleach and old wood. Olivia moved fast, one hand on the wall, the other locked around the briefcase. Arthur shuffled behind her, stubborn in his slowness, refusing help, each step a small battle. Ethan followed, one palm grazing the cool wall, aware of how the quiet here felt different from the rest of the house, closer, more honest, the way truth sounds in a whisper. They passed laundry carts and a metal shelf stacked with folded linens and bulk paper towels. Somewhere a pipe ticked, a steady, patient sound like a clock in a sick room. Olivia stopped at a service door with a latch hidden beneath a strip of molding. She pressed 2 fingers into the trim until it clicked, then slid the wood back to reveal a keypad that didn't belong in any staff corridor. She typed with quick precision. The door unlocked with a heavy, breathy sigh. Inside was a storage closet that wasn't a closet at all. The first 6 feet were brooms, vacuums, a plastic bin of light bulbs, then the floor dropped. A concrete stairwell opened like a throat, swallowing the light. Olivia took a small flashlight from her pocket and clicked it on. The beam cut a narrow path down gray steps. Arthur braced a hand on the wall. I told you to seal this years ago, he said, breath thin with judgment. And I told you there'd come a night when you'd be glad I didn't, Olivia answered without turning. They descended into cool air. It smelled like metal and paper. At the bottom, thick door, vault handle. Olivia spun it, wrist steady, then pushed it open. Light washed over rows of steel shelves and flat files. A basement archive. Boxes labeled in black marker, ledgers 1981 to 1992, legal hold, Austin, community partnerships, property maps, South LA. Ethan's gut tightened. He'd grown up thinking legacy meant framed magazine covers and polished awards in mahogany cases upstairs, things built to be admired. Nothing like this. Nothing that hummed with the hum of things deliberately buried. Olivia set the briefcase on a worktable scarred with cuts and rings. She pulled on cotton gloves kept in a plastic bag near the lamp and lifted the lid. Inside, the envelopes gleamed like teeth. She opened a shallow drawer under the table and took out a battered cassette recorder and a stack of tapes, each labeled with dates. She clicked in one labeled, 4/12, Meet, V. The recorder whirred, a soft mechanical breath, and then a voice crackled through the small speaker, Arthur's, younger, steady, transactional. Another voice joined his, lower, polished, with a practiced warmth Ethan knew too well. Vivian. Ethan's chest tightened. You'll never get zoning without the councilman, Vivian's voice said on the tape. He wants assurances. And I want my piece. That's the deal. We expand the holding company, Arthur's recorded voice replied. You keep our name out of it. Silence, then a sound like ice clinking. Vivian again, I don't mind being the face, Arthur. I mind being the fall guy. Tape hissed. A door closed in the background, muted. Then Vivian's voice, softer, intent, south of Crenshaw First. The blocks near the old bus yard. Owners are scared, police pressure, rising insurance rates, no loans. We offer cash and speed. They'll take it. Ethan felt cold travel from his fingertips to his throat. What is this? He asked, though the answer was already forming, heavy and ugly. Your stepmother is not a socialite with a taste for charity galas, Olivia said, eyes on the boxes. She was an architect of acquisitions. And some of those acquisitions were calculated to strip families of options until they'd sell for pennies. Arthur leaned against the shelf, breath hitching. It was the market, he said, each word like a step onto thin ice. We didn't create the rules. You exploited them, Olivia replied, not unkindly, just flat. Red lines on maps, loans denied, code enforcement dropping fines only on some streets. You bought fear, packaged as opportunity. The tape kept spinning. On it, Vivian laughed softly. We do this right, nobody sees our hand. Title passes through the shell. In a year, nobody remembers who lived there. Ethan's jaw clenched until it hurt. He thought of ribbon cuttings, handshakes, newspapers calling the Chandlers visionary. He saw the glossy brochures for revitalization projects, the ones he'd posed with. He thought of the speech he gave last year about community partnerships. Words he'd believed. Words he'd sold. Olivia shut off the tape. The hum of silence returned, loud in his ears. There's more, she said. Payments. Off-book accounts. A councilman who wanted a private school seat for his son. A banker who used code words when denying loans. And Vivian, ensuring the deals stayed clean on paper. Ethan pressed his hands to the table to steady the tremor that had finally reached his legs. Why keep all this? He asked. If this could destroy you, why keep it at all? Because I learned the hard way that the only thing stronger than power is proof, Olivia said. And because there's something you haven't considered yet. She pulled another envelope from the briefcase, one with an embossed seal and a name written in hand Ethan didn't recognize. She slid out a thin photo, sun-faded, edges cracked. A family stood on a porch, a woman wearing a postal uniform still in her cap, two kids flanking her, one holding a basketball. The house number was hand-painted on the curb. The boy's smile looked like a dare. Olivia placed the photo on the table between them. They lived 3 miles from here. After the buyout, the mother took night shifts to afford a move inland. The boy missed his bus stop the first week at the new school. He was walking along a road with no sidewalk when a car ran the light. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The empty space carried the sound of sirens only she could hear. Arthur shut his eyes. Ethan stared at the boy in the picture and felt something inside him split, a clean tear, the kind you can't stitch with money or apologies. Who were they to you? He asked, voice hoarse. Olivia took a breath, set her palm flat on the table to steady herself. The boy was my brother. No one spoke. The basement hummed, the shelves held their breath, the tape recorder's tiny window reflected the hard light like a cold eye. I came here to watch, Olivia said finally. To keep records. To stop what I could. To make sure Arthur paid in the only currency that matters to men who think they own the world, fear. Not of jail. Of truth. Arthur's throat worked. You stayed, he said, as if only now hearing the answer buried in his own question. All these years. You stayed. Because bringing this down from the outside was easy, she said. But it wouldn't change you. I needed you to see it from within. I needed your son to hear it with your voice on tape. Ethan looked at Arthur. The man he'd idolized had shrunk into a person who could barely meet his own son's eyes. "How far does this go?" Ethan asked. Olivia pointed to a box labeled, "Property Maps, South LA. "Farther than you want to admit," she said. "But it can stop. Not with press releases. With names. With documents. With the board you chair stepping down on camera because you refuse to hide behind legacy anymore." Arthur's jaw tightened. "You're asking us to burn everything." "I'm asking you to tell the truth before someone else tells it for you," Olivia said. "That man upstairs. He doesn't want to expose you. He wants leverage. He'll sell it to your enemies, to reporters, to anyone willing to trade influence for silence. He'll make you his property." A faint vibration ran through the table. Footsteps above. Then another sound. Low, distorted, like a phone on speaker facing a ceiling. Olivia tilted her head, listening. "He planted a device," she murmured. "He was never here to leave empty-handed." Ethan moved on instinct. "Kill the power to this room," he said. "If he's piggybacking on the house circuits, we cut his eyes." Olivia was already moving. She crossed to a gray box mounted near the door, flipped two heavy switches. The hum lowered. The overhead lights clicked off, leaving only the flashlight's tight beam and a battery lamp glowing by the recorder. The basement felt smaller, but safer, like ducking under a table during a storm. Ethan leaned into the circle of light. The boy's photo sat where she'd left it, the edges curled like they'd been handled 100 times. "If we go public," he said, "Vivian will come for you." "She already did," Olivia answered. "You heard the tape." "And if we don't?" Ethan asked. Olivia looked at Arthur, then back at Ethan. "Then you stay rich and haunted. And a stranger owns your life." Upstairs, a door slammed. Ethan pictured hall cameras, hidden mics below stair lips, dead zones and blind angles. He pictured Vivian's smile, a blade wrapped in velvet. He pictured the man in the hat returning, softer steps next time, a locksmith's hands that never left prints. He closed his eyes and saw the boy again, the unafraid grin, the basketball tucked into one elbow. He opened them, and the room held 3 people who had run out of lies to stand on. If you're watching this, the thought formed as if spoken, you already know when stories like this are real, they don't end at a front door. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the truth hits daylight, because the choice made in this room will ripple through every room that ever looked the other way. Arthur reached for the recorder with fingers that had signed deals worth billions and now shook over a plastic rectangle. "Play the next one," he said. Olivia slid in another tape. "Boardroom. March 3rd. She pressed play. Voices rose, a CFO, a lawyer, Arthur, and Vivian guiding like a conductor, redirecting risk, cauterizing exposure, choosing which neighborhoods could absorb transition, and which needed pressure partners. Ethan listened until the sound of his own breath annoyed him. He forced it quieter, slower. "Enough," he said, and the word came out steadier than he felt. "We take this upstairs. We gather the originals. We call outside counsel who won't fold. Then we call the press. Not a leak, our statement. Names included." Arthur looked like a man learning to stand after a long illness. "You'll lose everything," he said, and there was no heat in it, only a father's worn-out warning. Ethan met Olivia's eyes. "Or we'll finally own something that isn't purchased." The lamp flickered. Olivia checked the battery with a quick glance, then nodded. "We go carefully. We move the tapes in 2 batches. I'll take the first. You take the ledgers. Arthur takes nothing but his cane. If we're separated, we meet at the gardener's gate." They divided the weight of the past into boxes they could hold. When they reached the stairwell, Olivia raised a hand. "Listen." Silence. Then a voice, distant, muffled by floors but close enough to name. "Vivian." Smooth, calm, speaking to someone on a phone with the assurance of a person who never expects to be caught. No, he's here. He saw enough. Don't come to the front. Service drive. 8 minutes. Arthur sagged against the rail. Olivia flicked off the lamp. The world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Ethan leaned in, voice a thread. This is the moment. Olivia nodded once. Then we make it ours. If you've stayed with this family this far, you know what silence costs. Subscribe now, because what comes when they open that door is the point where most stories flinch, and this one won't. The stairwell was tight, every creak magnified in the silence. Ethan's pulse thundered as he carried a ledger box, its weight nothing compared to the pressure crushing his chest. Arthur leaned heavily on the rail, his face pale under the thin glow of Olivia's flashlight. She moved ahead with quick, precise steps, leading them back toward the service hallway. Then the voices came again. Not distant this time, closer, clearer. Vivian's voice floated through the air, smooth as silk, commanding without raising a single note. Stay by the East Drive. No headlights. I'll signal when it's clear. Arthur stiffened, his breath catching in his throat. Ethan felt his stomach twist. His stepmother wasn't just complicit, she was orchestrating. Olivia killed the flashlight, plunging them into near blackness. She's inside, she whispered. Too close. They waited, pressed against the cool wall of the hallway. Ethan could make out the faintest trace of perfume drifting toward them, the scent Vivian always wore, sharp jasmine, laced with smoke. It reached him before her footsteps did, like the warning of a predator. And then she appeared, framed in the glow of a wall sconce, her figure poised, elegant, unhurried. Vivian Chandler, in a tailored midnight coat, heels clicking softly against the marble. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even look curious. She looked like someone walking into a boardroom already knowing the vote had gone her way. Well, she said, her eyes sliding across the three of them, the family reunion I wasn't invited to. Ethan's grip on the ledger box tightened. How long have you been listening? Vivian's lips curved. Long enough to know you're in over your head. That little performance in the basement. You think dragging out old tapes makes you righteous? It makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability is expensive. Arthur straightened with what dignity his frail frame could muster. You never had the right to those deals, Vivian. You forced my hand. Her laugh was soft, cutting. Don't rewrite history, Arthur. You needed me. You still do. Without me, you're just another old man clinging to oil money nobody respects anymore. I gave the Chandler name relevance. I gave it reach. And now your son thinks he can tear it all down with his conscience. Ethan stepped forward. It wasn't conscience you built this on. It was exploitation. Families lost homes while you cashed checks. Vivian's gaze snapped to him, icy. And what did you lose, Ethan? Nothing. You lived your entire life off the rewards of those decisions. You wore them like crowns, awards, headlines, magazine covers. Now you want to act like a martyr. Her words struck like blows. Ethan faltered, shame prickling, but Olivia's steady presence anchored him. She stepped between them, her voice sharp. This isn't about what Ethan knew or didn't know. This is about the people you left bleeding in the shadows while you toasted your victories. Vivian's smile thinned. Ah. The maid with a pistol. I should have known you'd be trouble. Olivia's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Her silence was an answer in itself. Vivian walked slowly into the hall, heels clicking, her hands sliding along the wall as though she owned every inch of it. You think you can expose me? Who do you imagine will listen? Reporters? Politicians? Judges? She leaned close enough that Ethan could smell the wine on her breath. They all dined at our table. They all signed their names on checks we wrote. Tear me down, and you tear yourself down with me. Ethan's voice shook, but he didn't back away. Maybe it's time we burn it all. Vivian tilted her head, studying him. For the first time, her smile faded. Be careful, Ethan. Fire doesn't discriminate. Burn me, and you'll be ashes too. Olivia broke the tension. We have what we need. The tapes, the ledgers, the proof. You can't bury this anymore. Vivian's eyes flicked to the box in Ethan's arms, then to the briefcase Olivia carried. Her tone shifted, softer but sharper. Do you even know what's in there? Do you understand how much blood is attached to those pages? You'll never make it to the press. I've already prepared for this night. And while you were fumbling in the basement, I was making calls. Arthur's cane thudded against the floor as he steadied himself. You've betrayed this family enough. She turned her gaze on him, her expression cold. No, Arthur. I built this family. Without me, your empire would have crumbled the day oil lost its shine. You think your son is strong enough to carry what you built? He's naive. He doesn't have the stomach for it. The word stung, but Ethan forced himself forward, blocking her path. Maybe I don't. But I know one thing, you're finished. Vivian's laugh returned, low and mocking. You don't even realize how late you are. The man you met earlier? He doesn't answer to me anymore. He answers to people far more dangerous than you can imagine. And they're not as sentimental as I am. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Ethan's breath came faster, the hallway shrinking around him. For years, he had seen Vivian as an ornament to his father's empire. Now she stood before him revealed as its architect, its executioner, and its greatest weapon. If you've been following this story, you can feel the danger pressing in. Don't turn away when the truth sharpens its knife. Subscribe now, because what's coming next will show you how far betrayal is willing to go. Vivian reached into her coat and pulled out a phone, dialing quickly, her eyes never leaving theirs. Yes, she said into the receiver. They have it. No, don't wait for me. Do it now. She ended the call, slid the phone back into her pocket, and looked at them with calm finality. You have 5 minutes, maybe less. Ethan's chest tightened. 5 minutes for what? Vivian's smile returned, cruel and effortless. To decide whether you want to die with your father's secrets in your hands, or hand them over and walk away. The house groaned above them. A door slammed. Then another. More footsteps than one person could make. Ethan realized the mansion wasn't just haunted by the past tonight. It was surrounded by the present. Vivian had brought company. Olivia's pistol was already in her hand, her eyes darting toward the nearest exit. We can't stay here. We move now. Arthur's voice was hoarse but steady. No. If we run, she wins. The only way out is through. Vivian's expression softened almost imperceptibly, as though amused by the fight still left in them. How noble, she said. But nobility won't save you. The echo of boots on marble drew closer. Heavy, certain, closing in from both ends of the hall. Ethan's pulse spiked. Every door in the house felt like it was about to burst open. He turned to Olivia. Where's the safest way out? She didn't blink. There isn't one. Only the way forward. Ethan looked at his father. Arthur's frailty was written across his body, but in his eyes burned the same steel Ethan had seen in the boardroom, the steel that had built an empire and destroyed rivals without flinching. For once, father and son stood on the same side of the line. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed against the walls. Vivian's smile widened. They're waiting for my signal. She raised her hand slowly, fingers poised to snap. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not tonight. And before she could move, Olivia pulled him and Arthur back toward the library, the weight of the ledgers rattling in his arms as they ran. If you've stayed with this family through the darkness, you know the fire is only starting. Subscribe now, because the next chapter will decide who walks out of this house alive. They burst into the library before Vivian's fingers could snap, the door thudding shut behind them. Ethan slid the heavy lock into place and dropped the ledger box on the nearest table, papers shifting inside like a trapped animal. Olivia crossed the room in 3 long strides, reached above the third shelf from the left, and pressed a recessed brass stud disguised as a screw head. A narrow panel clicked open behind a row of first editions. "Through," she said. "Now." Arthur hesitated only long enough to steady his cane. Ethan eased him into the hidden passage, then yanked the shelf back into place. Darkness swallowed them. Olivia's flashlight carved a thin seam through dust and cold air, revealing a timber-framed corridor that angled away from the library like a vein. Boots pounded outside. The library handle rattled. A voice shouted, deep, confident, not Vivian's. Another answered from down the hall. The house had become a chessboard and they were already in check. "This tunnel runs to the old security room," Olivia whispered. "When the estate was renovated, the contractors left the wiring intact. If we can reach it, we cut interior feeds and lock all ground-level doors at once." "Can it be done?" Ethan asked. "It has to be." They moved in a crouched hurry, the beam grazing spiderwebs and conduit pipes, the scent of old books giving way to colder metal. At a junction, Olivia paused, listening. The ceiling above them thrummed with movement, men fanning out, radios hissing in clipped whispers. Vivian's calm voice cut through once, giving directions like a maestro: East Hall, service entrance, library flank. Arthur's breath was shallow but stubborn. He gripped Ethan's forearm when the floor dipped. "Don't go, hero," he murmured, a thread of dry humor even now. "Heroes die in other people's stories." "Then we change whose story this is," Ethan said, shocking himself with the steadiness of his own voice. Olivia lifted a grill with a careful, quiet pry. Cool blue light spilled down from a cramped room stacked with monitors, patch panels, and a hulking beige rack that looked older than Ethan. She slipped inside first, scanned, then waved them up. The security room hummed with a tired electricity. Some monitors showed static, others displayed stark black and white views of hallways, stairwells, and the service drive. 3 figures crossed the east corridor in formation. Another camera caught Vivian in the marble gallery, composed, phone at her ear, as if she were confirming a dinner reservation rather than cornering a family. Olivia sat at a terminal and woke the keyboard. The interface looked like it belonged in a museum, gray menus, blocky fonts, but her hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd practiced on it when nobody watched. "They patched a device into the north loop," she said, scanning. "That's how they see the service halls. But this board still routes interior locks." Arthur pointed to a monitor showing the side staircase. "That one leads to the kitchen courtyard. The gardener's gate is beyond the hedges. If we hit the courtyard, we'll be seen from 3 angles," Olivia said. "We need dark and noise." Ethan's eyes fell to a dusty binder labeled Emergency. He flipped it open. Old schematics, half-yellowed. He traced a finger over the blueprint of the library wing. "Here. The fire suppression test line. If we trigger a false heat spike in the gallery, we'll flood the sprinklers there and cut power to that segment." Olivia glanced over, then nodded. "Do it." He found the maintenance panel diagram, yanked open a metal cover under the rack, and toggled 2 tiny red switches hidden behind a safety plate. An alarm chirped in the distance, then muted to a low, steady buzz. On the monitors, the gallery lights flickered, then erupted in water. Vivian stepped back fast, hand up to protect her face, composure cracking for the first time. "Good," Olivia breathed. "Now the locks." She punched in a string of code so quickly Ethan couldn't memorize a single digit. One by one, the little green LEDs next to ground, east, ground, north, service, south flipped to red. On a camera feed, Two men reached a door and found it suddenly unresponsive, their radios lit with sharp, annoyed chatter. Olivia turned to them, voice low. "We have 30 seconds before whoever's on the other end reroutes. We go now, hedges and shadows. We carry only what we can't replace. The rest we burn if cornered." Arthur straightened. "I carry nothing," he said. "If they take anyone, it's me. You two run." "No," Ethan said, surprised at the heat in the word. "We leave together." The monitors flickered, someone upstream was pushing new commands. Olivia killed the screens with a palm to the main breaker, plunging the room into a pulse of dark before her flashlight steadied them again. Time. They slid back through the grill and retraced the tunnel until a rusted ladder rose to a trap. Olivia braced, pushed, and cool night air spilled down, wet hedges, distant sirens, that particular leaf and sprinkler smell that only appeared after midnight in the hills. They emerged into a narrow strip of garden hemmed in by a wall of boxwood. Water beaded on the leaves and filmed Ethan's lashes. The hedges formed a maze, symmetrical under the moon. Each path felt like a choice that would matter more than any decision he'd made in a boardroom. "Left," Olivia whispered. "Stay low." They moved, ducking under dripping green, shoes silent on the damp gravel. Voices approached and faded, flashlight beams slicing through gaps like spears of light. A beam washed inches from Ethan's cheek and carried on. He didn't breathe until it was gone. At a crossroads in the hedges, a silhouette appeared, a man with a radio pressed to his jaw. He stopped, listening, head tilting. Olivia's hand rose, a stop sign. The man stepped forward, just enough for the moon to catch the pale line of a scar across his chin. Ethan didn't think. He set the ledger box down and picked up a fist-sized rock from the border of the path. He lobbed it over the hedge to their right. It cracked against a ceramic planter with an echoing clink. The man swung toward the sound and moved in that direction, radio whispering now urgent. Olivia's eyes met Ethan's. A nod. They slid left, pressed on, breath controlled in small, patient sips. The gardener's gate emerged out of the green, a dark rectangle of iron set into stucco. Olivia tried the handle. It didn't budge. She crouched, reached through the bars, and found the interior latch with the practiced fingers of someone who'd done this before for grocery deliveries that arrived late. The latch clicked. The gate eased. Beyond lay the service drive, silent, a ribbon of asphalt leading to the road. A shadow cut across the drive. Another. Vivian's men had posted someone there too. Olivia scanned the dark, calculating angles. She turned to Ethan. "Your car." "Borrowed." "Parked down on Willow Glen," he whispered. "No tracker, no driver." "Good." She handed him the briefcase. It felt heavier than before, as if it had pulled all the weight of the house into its leather spine. "You go first with Arthur. 10 yards out, drop to the ivy bed and wait. I'll draw them past." Ethan shook his head. "We stay together." "That's not the move," she said, voice calm. "Let me do what I'm here to do." Arthur squeezed Ethan's wrist. "Son." Ethan swallowed the protest and nodded. He guided Arthur through the gate, keeping low, feet silent on the asphalt. They reached the ivy bed, slid belly down into the dark tangle, the smell of earth sharp in his nose. The briefcase pressed against his ribs. He could feel the tape spools as if they were little hearts. Olivia stepped out into the open like she owned the night. "Hey," she called, voice strong, cutting cleanly through the hush. Two men pivoted instantly, beams slashing toward her. She lifted her empty hands high. "You're looking for me." One of the men moved closer, weapon low but ready. "Where's the case?" "With a lawyer by now," she said, smile too calm to be believed. "You missed your window." The second man spoke into his radio. In the distance, a car engine coughed awake. Tires whispered. Another door opened somewhere unseen. The first man reached for Olivia's arm. She stepped back just out of reach, drawing them toward the hedges opposite the ivy bed. As they advanced, Ethan slid forward, pulling Arthur inch by inch toward the lane. The briefcase snagged on a root, he pried it free, breath barely moving. "Stop talking and move," the first man snapped at Olivia. "Hands behind your—" Something cracked from the far side of the property, glass, maybe, or a fence post, or a third guard stepping on the wrong thing at the wrong time. Both men flinched. Olivia ran, not away, but along the hedge, leading them like a decoy flare. Ethan rose in a crouch and guided Arthur across the remaining stretch of drive. They hugged the shadow of the retaining wall and reached the mouth of the lane. Willow Glen curved below them, silver under the thin streetlights. A car idled at the curb. Not Ethan's. A sleek sedan with its lights off, engine barely a murmur. A figure sat behind the wheel, posture too still to be a coincidence. Ethan froze. Arthur gripped his sleeve. "We can't stop," the older man whispered. They slipped down the slope, staying in the black between the pools of lamplight. The sedan's engine note dipped, then rose, like a predator scenting movement. The driver's head turned, a phone screen lit his face in ghostly blue. Ethan caught the shape of his mouth as he spoke, just a name, nothing more. Vivian's or Ethan's, he couldn't tell. They reached the far side of the car without the driver moving. Olivia's diversion still held. Ethan felt a flare of something dangerously like hope. Then the passenger door opened. Vivian stepped out as if arriving for a gala, coat immaculate, hair untouched by the gallery sprinklers, eyes glittering with the kind of satisfaction that doesn't come from victory so much as inevitability. "Going somewhere?" she asked softly. Arthur straightened, finding a spine that the years had tried and failed to take. "We're done playing your game." Vivian regarded him with something like pity. "You were never the one moving the pieces," she said. "You were the board." Olivia appeared on the ridge behind them, breath controlled, gun low. The two men she'd lured had lost her trail, their beams swung uselessly across shrubs. For a heartbeat, the geometry of the night shifted, Vivian, the driver, Ethan with Arthur, Olivia above, like lines drawn on glass that could still be erased. "Last offer," Vivian said, voice silken. "Give me the case. Walk back inside. Wake up tomorrow with your headlines intact." Ethan lifted the briefcase slightly, letting her see it without letting it go. His hands stopped trembling. "We don't wake up from this," he said. "We walk through it." She watched him, the way a jeweler watches a stone under light. When she smiled, it was small and almost sad. "In another life, you might have been very good at my work. In this one," he said, "I'm finished being useful to yours." Her eyes flicked past him, to Olivia, to Arthur, to the slope where the hedges opened like a throat. She made her choice. "Then run." She stepped back, a hand gesture to the driver, "Wait," and to the men with the flashlights, "Close in." It wasn't mercy. It was theater. She wanted them to feel hunted on the way out. Ethan leaned into Arthur. "We go." They moved as one, down the last incline, across the strip of night between lamp pools, into the narrow cut that led toward Willow Glen proper. Behind them, the driver's engine revved. Olivia covered their retreat, measured, precise, backing down in a long arc that kept the gun between Vivian's men and the two Chandlers. If you've stayed with them this far, you know the part where most people freeze. Don't. Subscribe now so you don't miss the moment they choose light over protection, because escaping the house is only the beginning, and the real fight starts once the city can see them. They reached Ethan's borrowed car, black paint reflecting a starless slice of sky. He got Arthur into the back seat, buckled him, then slid behind the wheel. Olivia slipped into the passenger seat, eyes still scanning, gun low between her knees. The briefcase settled on the console, heavy as a verdict. "Drive," Olivia said. He did, down the curve, onto the artery road, past sleeping houses and motionless sprinklers. In the rear view, the sedan's lights flared to life. They weren't alone. Where? Ethan asked, knuckles white on the wheel. Not home. Not a hotel, Olivia said. Somewhere that lives on daylight. A newsroom, Ethan said, the answer rising and settling like it had been waiting the whole time. Arthur exhaled a sound that might have been a laugh. Or a sob. At last, he whispered. The sedan closed distance. Another set of lights appeared 2 blocks back. Vivian had layered the net. Ethan pushed the accelerator. The engine answered with a clean, urgent pull. Intersections blurred. Red lights became choices. He made them. Left, Olivia said. Then straight. There'll be cameras at the gas station. Make sure they see your face. He glanced at her. Ours? Hers, Olivia said. This stops being shadows when she can't hide behind ours. The sedan edged closer, the driver cautious, trained. Ethan slid the car through a yellow, felt the suspension dip, heard Arthur's breath catch and steady again. The city opened ahead, distant skyline, silent neon, the wide, indifferent night. If you think the danger ends when you hit the road, you've never tried to outrun a past this determined to survive. Subscribe, because the next turn decides whether the truth sees morning. The freeway stretched wide and empty under the washed-out glow of sodium lamps. Ethan's hands clenched the wheel, veins rigid beneath his skin, as the borrowed car swallowed lane after lane. The briefcase rested between him and Olivia like an explosive neither dared to touch. In the back seat, Arthur's head lolled against the leather, eyes closed but not asleep, his breathing too shallow, too aware. Behind them, headlights prowled. Sometimes one pair, sometimes 2, sometimes none at all. They never vanished completely. Vivian's net was still around them, patient and relentless. Where do we go that isn't already in her pocket? Ethan asked, voice hard, cracking at the edges. Someplace where money can't silence the truth, Olivia said. Her gaze was fixed on the mirrors, calculating each shift of the headlights. A newsroom. An outlet she can't buy. Arthur stirred. She'll know every editor. She'll bury the story before the ink dries. Not if it's live, Olivia shot back. Not if it's broadcast with evidence in hand, where millions can't unhear it. The idea lodged in Ethan's mind like a spark. Vivian thrived in shadows, in contracts signed behind closed doors. Expose her under lights, and even her allies would scramble to protect themselves. But Arthur's silence pressed on him. When Ethan glanced in the mirror, he saw not just exhaustion but regret pooling in his father's eyes. You knew, Ethan whispered. All this time. You let her run it. Arthur's hand trembled against his cane. I told myself it was survival. Oil was collapsing. Politics were tilting. She had vision where I had fatigue. You had a choice, Ethan snapped, voice cutting through the cabin. And you chose power. The words landed like a slap. For the first time, Arthur looked smaller than his frailty. He looked like a man weighed down by the choices that built his fortune. The headlights behind them grew larger, closing distance. Olivia's voice sharpened. They're moving in. Next exit, take it. Ethan jerked the wheel, tires squealing as they cut across 2 lanes. The car shot onto a narrower road lined with shuttered warehouses, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the night. The tail followed, its engine humming low and steady, a predator keeping the kill in sight. Olivia pointed. That building, Channel 9's satellite office. They run overnight crews. Ethan gunned the engine, heart hammering. But as they approached, the glow of a security light revealed 2 black SUVs already parked in front. Figures leaned against them, smoking casually, waiting. Vivian had outflanked them. Not there, Olivia hissed. Keep moving. Ethan pressed harder on the gas. They cut deeper into the warehouse district, roads narrowing, streetlights flickering. His chest burned with the realization that every direction they turned, Vivian was already waiting. Arthur coughed violently, his voice rasping. She'll never stop. Not with words. Not with papers. She'll only stop when someone makes her stop. Ethan's knuckles whitened. And what are you suggesting? Arthur didn't answer, but his silence was louder than anything. Olivia's voice steadied him. There's still another way. South of here, St. Matthew's Shelter. I have a contact there who owes me more than one favor. We can disappear long enough to get this evidence secure. The shelter. Ethan remembered driving past it in his college years, a squat brick building tucked between factories, always with a line of people waiting under its neon cross. It wasn't a place Vivian would ever lower herself to step into. Go, Ethan said. They turned off again, headlights bouncing as the road cracked into uneven asphalt. The tail hesitated at the intersection, then continued straight. Either they hadn't noticed the turn, or Vivian thought she had them cornered already. For the first time in hours, the road behind them emptied. The car slowed as the neon cross came into view, buzzing faintly in the dark. St. Matthew's looked weary but alive, dim light glowing through stained windows, the faint murmur of voices inside. Ethan pulled into the back lot, tucked between rusting dumpsters. Olivia was out first, scanning the shadows with her pistol drawn. Ethan helped Arthur from the back seat, the old man's weight heavy against his shoulder. Together, they slipped inside through a side door. The air smelled of coffee grounds and soap. Folding chairs lined the hall. A stack of donated blankets slumped against the wall. A weary man in a hoodie looked up from a mop and froze when he saw Olivia. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He set the mop aside and gestured them deeper inside without a word. Downstairs, Olivia said. Safe room. Ethan guided Arthur toward the basement steps. Each creak of wood sounded like a broadcast of their position. At the bottom, the room opened into a low-ceilinged space lined with shelves of canned food and bottled water. Olivia flicked a switch, and a single bulb buzzed to life overhead. They set the briefcase on a battered metal table. For a moment, none of them moved. The weight of the night pressed in. Ethan finally broke the silence. If we put this out, if we show the world the tapes, the ledgers, Vivian doesn't just go down. So does the Chandler name. The company. Everything. Olivia met his gaze without blinking. Legacies don't matter if they're built on graves. Arthur sat heavily on a chair, his cane across his knees. His voice was barely a whisper. Do you think the world will forgive? No, Ethan said, surprising himself with the certainty. But maybe it will finally see. Olivia opened the briefcase, laid out the envelopes and tapes like relics. Her hands were steady, but her eyes flicked to the door, to the ceiling, always listening for footsteps that weren't theirs. Ethan leaned against the wall, the bulb's light harsh on his face. For the first time since he'd stepped off the jet, he felt the shape of a choice forming, one that didn't have Vivian's fingerprints on it, one that wasn't written in his father's voice. His own choice. If you're still watching this unfold, you already know silence is what predators count on. Subscribe now, because what happens when Ethan makes his choice will decide whether this story ends in justice, or in burial. Arthur cleared his throat, forcing strength into his words. If you release this, Ethan, you destroy me. Ethan looked at his father, the man who had raised him in towers and polished boardrooms, the man who had never once let him see weakness until tonight. No, he said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I'm just deciding whether the world gets to know. The sound of tires screeched faintly outside. Olivia's head snapped toward the stairwell. They're here. Ethan grabbed the briefcase, heart pounding. Then we finish this before they open that door. The bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the tapes. The room smelled of dust, coffee, and fear. And somewhere above, Vivian's voice gave another calm order that would echo into the basement like a final countdown. If you understand what's at stake, you know this isn't just their fight. Subscribe now, because what comes through that door next could change everything. The first thud shook dust from the ceiling. Ethan jerked his head upward, listening. Another thud followed, heavier, closer. Whoever Vivian had sent wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They wanted them to hear, to feel the trap closing. Olivia moved fast, sliding the tapes back into the briefcase. She killed the light with a flick of the switch, plunging the room into a gray dimness where only thin cracks of light seeped from the stairwell above. "We don't fight them down here," she whispered. "They'll pin us like rats." Arthur gripped his cane with both hands. His eyes gleamed in the half-dark. "If she's here, she'll want a show. Vivian doesn't settle for shadows. She'll come herself." The stairwell creaked, each step deliberate, as if confirming Arthur's words. And then her voice carried down, smooth and unhurried. "Do you know what's remarkable about secrets?" Vivian's tone was calm, conversational, as though she were addressing a crowd at a gala. "They only matter as long as the right people don't know them. Once the wrong people do, they become currency. And I always control the market." Olivia raised her pistol, sighting the shadows at the top of the stairs. Ethan held the briefcase tight, his knuckles bloodless. He thought of how many times Vivian had hosted dinner at the estate, offering small smiles and perfect toasts. Now every word from her mouth dripped poison. Vivian descended slowly, her heels striking wood, her silhouette sharpening with each step. Behind her came two men, broad, suited, their eyes flat with purpose. She reached the bottom and paused, her gaze sweeping the cramped room as if she'd designed it herself. "Well," she said, lips curving faintly, "the prodigal son in a soup kitchen. How poetic." Ethan stepped forward, jaw clenched. "This ends tonight." Vivian laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, Ethan. You think ending me ends this story? Look around you. This room is filled with nothing but dust and canned beans. Do you believe the world will care about ledgers and tapes dug up by a bitter maid?" Her eyes flicked to Olivia. A maid who could have had her price, but instead chose martyrdom. Olivia didn't flinch. "I chose truth." Vivian's smile thinned. "Truth is just a tool. And like all tools, it belongs to whoever wields it best. Do you think you'll live long enough to wield it at all?" Ethan felt Arthur move beside him, his father's frailty trembling but his eyes clear. "You'll never own this family again, Vivian." She turned to him, expression softening with mock pity. "Arthur. You invited me in. You needed me. And now you sit here pretending you were forced. Don't insult me with weakness. You wanted the empire, and I built it for you. If you're disgusted now, it's only because the lights are on." The two men stepped closer. Olivia's pistol snapped up, steady. The room tightened into a silence so brittle Ethan could hear the hum of the refrigerator upstairs. "Walk away," Olivia said. "Or the first shot ends your leverage." Vivian's eyes glittered. "You won't shoot. You've had your chance before." "Try me," Olivia answered, voice flat, finger taut on the trigger. For a moment, no one moved. The tension pressed into Ethan's chest like a blade. Then Vivian laughed again, low and confident. "You won't shoot because you know killing me makes the story vanish. I am the story. Without me, it's just numbers and paper." She looked at Ethan, her gaze like ice. "So I'll give you a choice. Hand over the case, and you walk out alive. Keep it, and you don't see the sun rise." Ethan's grip on the briefcase tightened. His whole life had been built in Vivian's shadow, his successes tangled in deals he hadn't seen until now. But staring at her in this dim basement, he realized something sharp and undeniable: fear was exactly how she had kept them all in line. He took a step forward, lifting the briefcase high so she couldn't miss it. "This case doesn't make you powerful anymore," he said, his voice breaking but growing stronger. "It makes you exposed." Vivian's eyes narrowed. For the first time, her mask cracked. If you've been watching this far, you know what it feels like when fear finally flips into defiance. Subscribe now, because what happens when Vivian loses control will turn everything upside down. The men tensed, ready to move. Olivia braced, finger firm on the trigger. But before anything could break, Arthur rose slowly from his chair. His cane wobbled, but his voice cut through the air like steel. "Vivian. Enough." Everyone froze. Vivian tilted her head. "You of all people think you can stop me?" Arthur stepped between Ethan and Vivian, his fragile frame defiant. "I gave you my silence once. That was my sin. But tonight, I give my son my voice. If this is the last thing I do, then so be it, but the world will know who you are." Vivian's expression flickered, just once, like a shadow crossing glass. Then the steel returned. "So be it," she whispered. She nodded to her men. The basement erupted. One lunged for Ethan, the other for Olivia. The room shook with chaos, boxes tumbling, metal clattering, the crack of a shot punching into concrete. Ethan wrestled for control, the briefcase pinned to his chest as fists slammed against his shoulders. Olivia fired once, the blast deafening, forcing the men back. Vivian didn't move. She stood still, watching, calm, her eyes locked on Ethan. He shoved the man off him, his breath ragged, and lifted the briefcase like a weapon. "This is over," he shouted, his voice raw. Vivian's lips curved again, but there was no warmth in it, only the quiet certainty of a storm yet to break. "No, Ethan. This has only begun." The sound of sirens cut through the night, faint but growing. Blue light flashed faintly through the cracks of the shelter windows above. Vivian's men hesitated, uncertainty flashing across their faces. Olivia caught it instantly. "Police," she barked. "Back down, or you'll be the ones in cuffs when they hit the door." The men faltered. Vivian's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened with calculation. She stepped back toward the stairs. "Enjoy your moment," she said softly. "It's the last one you'll have." She ascended with measured steps, her men retreating after her. The stairwell swallowed their silhouettes, their footsteps fading until only the sirens remained, closer now, echoing through the night. Ethan stood shaking, the briefcase still clutched to his chest. Arthur sank back onto the chair, his strength spent, his eyes heavy with both relief and dread. Olivia lowered her pistol, her hand trembling for the first time. They had survived the night. But Vivian wasn't finished. She had pulled back only because the law was at the door, and law was something she knew how to twist. Ethan knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that this wasn't victory. It was only the prelude. And if you've stayed with this story, you already know, the most dangerous enemy is the one who leaves on their own terms. Subscribe now, because what comes after this retreat will cut deeper than anything you've seen yet. The sirens faded into a low hum outside the shelter, but their echo clung to the walls like residue. The basement felt smaller now, crowded not by bodies but by decisions that could no longer be delayed. Ethan still had the briefcase clutched to his chest, and for the first time he realized it wasn't just paper inside, it was a weapon. One that could kill reputations, careers, legacies. One that could just as easily kill them if it slipped into the wrong hands. Arthur leaned heavily on his cane, his face pale beneath the flickering bulb. He seemed to shrink deeper into the chair, but his voice carried with a surprising steadiness. "If you release what's inside, you end me," he said. "Everything I built, everything you've lived from, it vanishes in a night." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You ended yourself the moment you let Vivian in. This isn't about me losing a legacy. It's about people who never had one because of us." Arthur's gaze broke, sliding toward the floor. For once, there was no counterargument, no fatherly lecture, only the silence of a man who had run out of lies to protect himself. Olivia snapped the briefcase open on the table. Envelopes, tapes, photographs, contracts, all lined up under the harsh bulb. Her hands didn't shake, but her eyes flicked constantly to the ceiling, listening for footsteps. We can't give this to the first cop who asks. Vivian has too many pockets to line. If this gets funneled into evidence control, it disappears by sunrise. So what do we do? Ethan asked. We make it undeniable, Olivia replied. We go live. A stream, unedited, raw. Her influence dies the moment millions of people see these documents and hear these voices. Arthur let out a hollow laugh. You think the world will forgive us if we confess? No, Ethan said, his chest burning. But maybe it will finally see. Above them, the shelter doors opened, voices of officers spilling down the stairwell. One called out, LAPD. Identify yourselves. Olivia didn't flinch. Basement. 3 civilians. 1 elderly. The first officer appeared moments later, flashlight beams slicing the room. Behind him came 2 more. Their eyes landed on the table, on the papers and tapes, and something shifted in their posture, a subtle tightening, the recognition of leverage. We'll need to secure that evidence, the officer said, nodding to the briefcase. Ethan placed his palm over it. You can watch. You can take copies. But nothing leaves this room until the world has seen it. For a tense beat, the officer hesitated. Another, older, stepped forward with a sigh. Let them do it, he murmured. Better everyone hears it than just us. Olivia was already dialing. They're ready to patch you through, she said. Independent outlet. Hates corruption, loves proof. We'll be live in 2 minutes. Arthur's hands shook on his cane. And who speaks? You. Her. Ethan set the briefcase aside and faced him. You. And me. The officers watched as Olivia propped her phone against a stack of canned food. A flashlight wedged into duct tape became their lamp. The table of evidence sat in frame. The live counter blinked to life. 0, then dozens, then hundreds, then numbers racing too fast to track. Arthur stared at the lens as if it were a jury. His voice cracked on the first word but steadied. My name is Arthur Chandler. For decades, I told myself the deals I made were legal. Tonight I admit they were also cruel. He named neighborhoods and dates. He spoke of signatures, zoning boards, handshakes traded for silence. He didn't say, we made mistakes. He said, I chose. He said, I agreed. He said, I profited. Olivia pressed play on a tape recorder. Vivian's voice filled the basement, crisp despite the hiss of old audio. South of Crenshaw first. Families there will fold fast. We use shells for title. In a year, no one remembers who lived there. The live comments surged. People typed street names, fragments of memory, my grandmother lived there. We lost that house. Others shouted for handcuffs, for resignations, for answers. Ethan felt each one hit like a stone hurled into his chest. He leaned into the frame. You know my face from magazines, from stories about grit and vision. I told myself I didn't know where the money came from. That was a lie I liked because it let me stay clean. I don't get to stay clean anymore. None of us do. The feed exploded again, thousands now, then tens of thousands. A split screen appeared as the outlet producer patched in, Arthur on one side, documents on the other. For once, no one could hide. If you followed this family through every dark hallway and locked room, don't look away now. Subscribe, because what happens after this broadcast is where most stories end, but this one is only getting louder. Arthur sagged after 20 minutes, his strength drained. Olivia carried the stream, unfolding document after document into the light, naming names with no tremor in her voice. Ethan read passages from the ledgers, dates and figures that felt like shackles finally lifted. By the time Olivia ended the stream, the number in the corner had crossed 6 figures. The shelter basement was quiet except for Arthur's ragged breathing and the soft buzz of the bulb. The officers stepped forward. The younger one cleared his throat. "We'll need your statements now. But what you did, it's already out there." Arthur nodded, his lips trembling but his eyes strangely light. "Then let's finish it properly." They climbed the stairs slowly, Arthur between Ethan and Olivia, the briefcase carried not as a burden now but as proof of survival. In the shelter's main hall, a television flickered. Staff and volunteers stood frozen, watching a replay of the broadcast, the Chandler name crawling across the bottom of the screen. Words like investigation, resignations, evidence seized burned in bold letters. Ethan caught the eyes of a woman in a postal uniform standing near the door. She held a paper bag of food to her chest, watching him with a face torn between disbelief and relief. When their eyes met, she gave him a small nod, acknowledgement, not forgiveness. And it was enough. They stepped outside into the pulsing blue of squad car lights. The night air was cold, damp with the promise of dawn. Reporters were already gathering, their lenses hungry, their voices urgent. For once, Ethan didn't turn away. "If you've stayed with them through every lie and revelation, you already know, truth isn't the ending. It's the beginning. Subscribe now, because what comes next isn't escape. It's consequence. And consequence doesn't hide."